Hello, hello, and welcome. Thank you to those of you as you're filtering in. We'll give it just a minute. I'm curious where people are joining from. Feel free to say hi in the chat as you're filtering in. Nice to see some familiar names. Thanks so much for making time today. Hello from London. Good evening. Got Austin in the house. I'm here in California, in San Francisco today. Another Coloradan. I'm from Boulder. Hi, Kenan. Aspen's pretty gorgeous. Hopefully getting some good snow. Excited to spend some time with you all today. This is actually my first webinar here at Assembled in the time I've been here, and it's a great chance to talk a little more about what's going on in the world and some of what we're seeing and hearing. So I guess let's go ahead and jump on into it. People will catch up as you join us. Let's go ahead. All right, we've got a bunch of stuff to cover. We'll get into some of the trends, data that we're seeing. I'll share some stories throughout, as well as some hopefully useful both reiteration of maybe things you're seeing and feeling and that you are not alone in some of the pressures you're facing today, some of the exciting things and also the scary things, and share some of what we're seeing is working and give you hopefully some ideas on how to approach challenges you're facing or looking at things as they are ahead. The genesis of today's conversation really comes from two things. So one is a survey that we've recently conducted with a bunch of companies across industries and sizes, both the mid-market companies that are somewhere in the 500 to 1,000 employee range and enterprise even larger, but also on the back of that, literally hundreds of conversations with many of you, support leaders from around the world at small companies all the way up to massive enterprises, really talking about the strategic pressures you're under, what are the big opportunities and priorities, all the things that you're seeing happening in the world. And we wanted to bring some of that data together to echo back for all of you who may not get to talk to hundreds of other support leaders all the time, as well as what we're seeing change in the landscape. You will all get a copy of the report after today's session. So I won't spend as much time on the specific data from that. I'll add on a number of the anecdotes of what we're hearing, some of the color and texture on top of that, that will hopefully be helpful for all of you. Starting with the biggest picture, three big trends that we'll spend time on today, and this really came through clearly in all of the feedback and all of our conversations. One is AI is truly redrawing the playing field at an insane rate. What's possible today, there are things we could not do 1 month ago, 6 months ago, 12 months ago. You are probably seeing some of that in your personal lives. I don't know how much you're playing around with ChatGPT, coding in different interfaces. Some of the things that can be done for you so much more easily today. It's changing incredibly quickly, and it's creating change for all of you. Some of you may be caught between top-down mandates, founders and others who are saying, hey, go figure out an AI strategy, do something about this quickly. You may have seen some of the hyperbolic claims in the news of we don't need people anymore. There were a lot of headlines maybe a year ago from companies who've since walked back from that and added a number of support agents or leaders in workforce management, operations, agents on the ground as they're realizing that AI is amazing. It's changing things, it's changing quickly, but it hasn't totally replaced people. And so keeping up with what you can do now and even every version of the models, every evolution of the applications of AI is shifting things very quickly. So we'll talk more about that. Second thing, and these two really are bigger trends over the last 5+ years. I've been watching this probably for 20 years in technology, is how expectations keep rising. Every one of us is a consumer in our personal lives. You've probably benefited in the same ways that I have of some of the great, like you can get it same day. You can have incredible service from big companies that have systematized a lot of outstanding response time, just giving refunds willy-nilly, making things easy as big companies that are not equally accessible to everyone under every constraint and pressure. But that doesn't change that the expectations keep going up, and people expect your teams to deliver better and better support without necessarily giving you more of the budget, more of the people to actually do that. The good news is that you have more levers to pull, whether that's outsourcing. And I've talked to a surprising number of companies recently who, even with teams of less than 100 support agents, are already working with BPOs to deliver at least some of their support. We're seeing it all the way up to the massive enterprises who may be pitting many BPOs against each other, doing sort of champion challenger model. But we're seeing both the outsourcing, the tiering of internal teams, and also the ways that AI, automation, even chatbots in the previous generation, all of those things come together to give you more tools to start meeting those expectations. Some of the things are working well, some of them are creating a new set of challenges, but fortunately, many of you are already finding good ways to navigate those. Even in the last 5 years, and I think this is a part of the backdrop of our survey as well, was just looking at, wow, things have been changing so fast. We all probably remember the craziness of the early pandemic and watching the rapid growth and then contraction for some companies, leading to both a scale up and then in some cases a cost cutting. With BPOs filling the gaps in some places, but also more efficiency as we're finding like smaller teams who are doing the operations, a lot of pressure to grow without growing headcount. One good example of this, I was talking to a company recently who's got a mandate to grow their new contacts by 38% this year without any incremental headcount. They're already using BPOs, they're using self-service heavily, they've got a ton of potential in AI that they're trying to figure out how to realize to be able to meet that goal. At the same time, the companies that are growing are also struggling to find the people they need to support that. I visited the headquarters of an amazing support organization recently. It was a stunning building in a downtown setting with 3 floors that was mostly empty. They had leased the space prior to the pandemic. They planned on building a big team there, and what they found is both incredibly low unemployment of the talent that they're looking for, and also a reluctance to return to work. So they've shifted a ton to both outsourcing and AI over time to let them continue to scale the business where they couldn't find necessarily all of the talent ready and willing to work. So what you'll see too in this, as we get into the stage where things are starting to normalize a little bit more, there's more balance today. The companies that are looking forward are also starting to anticipate some of the new wave of challenges that come from multiple different AIs and the potential for those to conflict. The ways that when you do layer things on, you can sometimes have a bad handoff. You have a great experience for a customer who has a chat, they get a resolution, it ends up getting escalated and handed off to an agent, but then there's maybe 2 or 3 days before someone is getting to that in the backlog. And you've suddenly broken that trust and the expectation of the consumer who went from instant and helpful to not actually getting their problem solved. So we're seeing more and more need for the coordination and orchestration across the full suite of tools you're using for support to really help you scale that dynamic volume without sacrificing the quality or agility. So a couple things here just to share. Back to this, AI is changing everything, and I'll talk a little bit more about AI at this point. Some of you may have seen Jensen Huang, who's the CEO of NVIDIA, on stage last year. You may have seen NVIDIA in the news a fair bit recently as the company that's making the chips that's powering a lot of the AI growth that's happening. Jensen got on stage talking about the future of AI and said one of the most impactful applications of AI technology is likely to be in customer service in the near term. His reasons won't particularly surprise you. They're all the things any of us who've ever responded to a case have seen. It's the need for a lot of critical, well-documented information, often repetitive manual effort, things that AIs or today's AI is phenomenally well-suited to be able to solve. A lot of people have been paying attention to this. There's a whole new wave of both startups and mature companies that have raced to apply AI to support. Good news for all of us, where hopefully there's a lot more help coming, but there's also a lot of noise that comes with that. A lot of, what do we actually do with this? We had a company recently who was doing a bake-off of 12 different vendors going, well, everyone's saying kind of the same thing. So how do we tell them apart? How do we figure out what's going on? And the realities on the ground are that there are a lot of similar things on the surface, and then the implementation of that reflects wildly different philosophies, values, skills at execution to get to pretty different results. Things that may favor quality, things that favor more of a human touch and relationship. So really figuring out what do you need to solve for in your support team. Where are the places that AI can give you the most leverage and value is a huge opportunity as you look forward this year. Probably many of you are, and certainly feel free to chat in and share some of your anecdotes. Almost everyone I've spoken to is thinking about AI or actively working on implementing AI and developing a strategy, executing against that strategy there. We're seeing a mix of things. So often this is a top-down mandate. Some of you may have founders who've said, go figure out how to automate 25% or more. I talked to a company recently. This was an upper limit that was told they need to automate 78% of their volume by the end of this year. They're making shockingly good progress, which is great. They're doing it literally percent by percent by percent. Which is an amazing thing. We're also seeing teams where it's coming more bottoms up of we want the productivity. We're using ChatGPT in our personal lives. I don't want to type all this stuff. It takes forever. I don't want to look all this stuff up. So we're getting a little bit of a groundswell too of agents who are really begging for better productivity tools, things they know are possible, and support leaders. Talked to someone recently at an amazing brand who has one BPO today and was like, look, I've got to grow. And it would be flat out irresponsible of me to go add another BPO ahead of figuring out what AI can do for us. We need self-service, we need automation, we need chat, we need all these things that we haven't done yet before we just go throw more people at the problem. So some of you may also still think of AI as more of the previous generation of chatbot. The thing that wasn't super smart, it was like, don't go outside the rails. Here's the couple topics I can answer, like make sure you stay with the prompt, almost like a slightly more dynamic IVR if you've thought of the push button on the phone tree. That's not today's AI. With today, we're seeing companies who are automating anywhere from 10% to 80% of their support volume, which can be immediately resolved by AI agents. They can know more about your products than almost any one person. We work with a lot of companies that have many brands, dozens of brands in some cases, 14 or more complex products that any one agent is trying to support. So there's a lot to know, and we're seeing both the onboarding for agents, but also the opportunity for AI agents to come in and help with, often it's 20 to 30% of your volume might be just knowledge inquiries, things that people could potentially look up in a help center if they were inclined to do so, or things where you've got internal resources and troubleshooting guides that you can give people the right steps to take if you've got an AI agent in there that can respond. They're infinitely patient, they're immediately available, they always follow your brand voice and style, so you never really have someone saying things where you're like, why did you say it like that? That's not how we talk. So there's a ton of advantages there, and we're seeing that growth of anywhere, again, 10 to 80% of support volume that companies can immediately resolve using AI across channels. You have to look at your own channel mix. We're seeing a lot of email channels still, especially in SaaS businesses, but more and more conversations about companies that want to embrace phone or do more with phone and voice. Maybe this is the rise of Alexa and Siri and the fact that we all actually are enjoying that we can do something on the go and not have to sit at a keyboard to interact. And you don't have to wait on hold anymore. So we're seeing companies embrace phone channels. Chat for more synchronous is a great experience of getting things in real time, but those have always been harder to staff for. That constraint is one that's being relaxed when you get good AI agents that are truly conversational, good quality of experience, good empathy into the mix. Reminds me actually of a great story. Someone played this clip for me recently of a phone call with a support agent, and they'd gotten escalated to a tier 2 agent. They're having the conversation. The customer goes, can you send me back to the nice lady at the beginning of the call? And it turns out it was an AI agent. The one playing this for me is leading the support team, goes, what do I do when my AI agents are better than some of my people? And that's the world we're working in. So if you're still in the mindset of AI is just a shitty chatbot with a bad experience, and I don't ever want to put that in front of my customers, there's still a real concern that your customers may not like and embrace AI because they're in that world too. But the possibility has shifted. So there's a ton that you can actually do to work across channels, get great experience, scale up the volume so that your agents, your best agents, can spend more time really solving the complex things, working with customers, building relationships where they matter. And that's where things like a co-pilot or an AI co-pilot for productivity, so being able to pull up information, take actions, trigger things like create a return label if you're in e-commerce, change a setting or an account level internally, remove a member or an admin from an account plan, things like that that are easy to automate, but save agents from jumping around between systems step by step by step. All of those can really help in the productivity when you do get to people, and you can provide a pretty great experience across channel with AI for so many others. So that's just to give you a flavor in case you're still living in the world of it's just old chatbots. It's not just chatbots anymore. There's a ton of really great experiences that we're seeing companies build today. The strategy, though, really does matter. And this gets maybe to some of the questions coming in of like, knowledge is certainly part of it. Anecdotally, I think you'd see probably 10 to 40% of any given company's support issues tend to be solvable just with knowledge and information versus taking action. RAG, or retrieval augmented, basically pulling in content and using that for AI to answer questions with pulling in documentation, that can help in a lot of cases and really cut through a bunch of the volume, but it's not the end all be all. This is where you also need to be connecting workflows and actions so that you are enabling systems to save some of those clicks as agents might be going across or take actions on behalf. So instead of just, for example, telling a customer, here's where you go to reset your password, can we actually trigger a password reset for you and send that directly? Maybe a better quality of care. So that you've got more of that white glove feeling for customers as they're reaching out. So you can get there with retrieval augmented generation, RAG. Thank you, Kenan, for dropping that in the chat as I stumbled. But really using that knowledge base. But you can really build on top of that with automations and workflows. And there's a lot of variation there we're seeing. In particular, as companies maybe have raced in some cases to embrace AI without oversight. So a lot of people, maybe last year, and we saw this in a bunch of cases, went and said, oh, it's really easy. You just drop all of your Help Center docs into OpenAI, and it'll give you an answer. And it turns out it will give you an answer, and it will absolutely make things up. There is an amazing degree of confidence that sometimes comes back, and I've seen it without guardrails, without some of the right inputs and prompts there. Actually invent URLs, which I wouldn't have expected. It'll make up something and be like, oh yeah, there's this software that exists at this website. It's right here, go get it. And you're like, did you make that up? And it's like, oh yes, I did. So it's not quite as simple as just drop it all into ChatGPT and get good outcomes. We're seeing really a lot of bifurcation. So one is the push to automate everything, and the other is the push to really have high quality. And the balance of we maybe want to go a little bit slower, crawl, walk, run in some places, so that you get to high quality, high confidence. One of the things we've done at Assemble, and this comes out of years of building for support, has really been to enable agents to be that human in the loop for a period of time while you build confidence that it's AI is speaking with your brand voice, it's giving correct answers, it's delivering the quality of service that you want for customers, instead of a black box, put stuff in, hope what you get out is good. So what we've really seen in this is find the right strategy for deploying AI for your goals and objectives. You can absolutely use it to cut costs and reduce ticket volumes. You can use it to get great experience and instant responses for a set of people, which can be just delightful and helpful. But AI alone isn't the silver bullet. So this is where a thoughtful deployment of how do you look at the quality and continue to monitor that? What are the tools that companies are giving you to optimize the inputs, right? Whether that's connecting to your other systems or what data you're pulling in, so you know you're pulling the right content. Or if you are one of the companies out there with multiple brands or different segments in your customer base, even looking for things like, how do I make sure that I connect my, if you've got a marketplace, your seller and your buyer content, so that that's not getting pulled to the wrong customer, so that you've got more of those guardrails around it as the way to get to really good responses at the end of the day. One great example is a company we've been working with for quite a while on AI. Honeylove is both e-commerce brand, some of you may be familiar with, wonderful team. They have been working in both workforce management with Assembled, but also was one of our early adopters of Assembled's AI product Assist. They're doing a couple of things with Assist. One is as a co-pilot to really help their agents around productivity, but the other is to automate more of their responses. Particularly, they started with email and doing a lot to get to great, quick resolutions, especially things like a complex return process. And they are like, look, we can't just feed this into a thing with a black box. We have, is it within 30 days? Is it actually 7 days outside the window? Are you a chronic person who returns? Like, there is a whole very complicated long list of criteria. Are you international or domestic? Where are you coming from? That gets to, do we offer you a return? Do we do a exchange? Here's the label to actually take care of this problem for you. They've automated that as a huge portion of the volume that is coming into their support team, but they had to do it really carefully. They are a company whose CEO will call their support line on a regular basis just to see what kind of experience, or email in anonymously to test that it's really representative of the brand they want to build. So they've got an incredibly high quality standard, but have seen great results as they've rolled out more of AI to automate and free up their agents, which let them handle at their peak periods of big sales and big e-commerce events, really let them spike their volume without having to add quite as many people or flex around. How do we train that many people that quickly for something that might only last for a week or two? So they've had some great experiences and results as an example of one of the companies that is really caring about quality and taking that progressive approach to let's automate, but let's do it thoughtfully where we still have humans in the mix. Looks like we got a question too about maybe some of the biggest misconceptions we see about AI adoption and customer support. So this may be a good place too to flag some of those of where we're seeing, again, it's the like, it's not just your old chatbot anymore. And it doesn't have to be, I think in Honeylove's case is a great example, it doesn't have to be set it and forget it or trust that it will just work. They've done a lot of work with us to actually have agents reviewing responses, to have their quality team looking into build out workflows that are more specific to their business, which takes more of the work up front. It's an option of how much do you invest there to say, for this flow that we get all the time, I think their returns is something like 5% of their business. Here's exactly what we want to happen. And so some people will build a workflow in the time it takes to resolve 1 or 2 tickets. That particular one was significant enough. They really put a lot of thought into here's what should actually happen. So I think that's one of the misconceptions we see is like, oh, it could never handle the complexity of my business. And the answer today is yes, it absolutely can handle. If you've got the right tools and you put in the right work, you can handle complex workflows, multi-brand, highly technical in many cases. So this happens to be an e-commerce company. We work with a lot of companies and talk to people who are like, oh, you could never have an AI solve my customers' problems. They have complex network setups, technical constraints, things that are going on. And what we found is actually, yes, many of those problems, and certainly not all of them, are either not so unique, or there's a place, and this is where it's not, can AI solve the whole thing or nothing at all? It's also a piecemeal of putting things together and saying, well, actually, what if we can get you to a resolution faster and accelerate so that the first 10 minutes of work, the low value stuff that's just data gathering and collecting input, what if we can automate that so that the second you do get to an agent, they can move immediately to helping? I sat through a call with a support agent recently at a financial services company. She spent 27 minutes on the call with a customer, and she's a super experienced agent. She was amazing. She was so patient, and like running into all of these problems. And she had asked at the beginning, like, a set of good qualifying questions, but she'd missed an important one, which is like, what's the email you're using to try and sign in? 27 minutes of this, we've gone back and forth on, is it a bug? Is it an issue? Is it browser? Is it cache? Whatever else. He's been trying to sign in with the wrong email. That's the sort of thing where if we've got, this is an important piece. If we collect that data up front, we're going to solve a whole bunch of these problems much, much faster. And we could have saved her the 27 minutes and gotten there potentially without a human at all. But definitely much more easily. So that's probably the other big one I'd highlight on the misconceptions is it doesn't just have to be scale at the expense of quality. You can choose how much you automate, where you use people, and you don't necessarily need to have AI be able to solve all of it to get to the value. Maybe one other good one I'll share, just because this surprised me a few weeks ago, talking to a company who said, oh yeah, our standard flow, we've got 80% of our agent time is actually spent on the phone. And most of it is we've got an average of an 8-minute handle time for people to collect a bunch of data. So our agents are gathering basically inputs, putting that into a ticket that's going to a queue so that the customer gets an email back the next day. And it's like, well, what if you actually had an AI agent collecting all that data? We've got an insurance company that's looking at doing this today. It's like, oh yeah, here's the 6 pieces we need to intake to open a claim. We can handle that for you so that when you do get to a person, we can immediately resolve it, or maybe you don't have to wait the 24 hours. Yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. A couple of those pieces, and certainly as more come to mind. This really all dovetails nicely with this idea of like AI is not just about more but worse. The expectation for all of you, and this came through so clearly in our survey results too, is that you are all being asked to do more and better, and to make it work with the resources you've got. So whether your budgets are growing or not, it isn't necessarily that people are slashing, but we're seeing that nice, steady, great business growth without necessarily the resources to match. So this is where you've got some tough trade-offs to make. Where do you focus on quality? Where do you actually focus on the scale piece? And both answers can work depending on your business. For this year, though, we're seeing really the conversation shift to more of that efficient scaling with fewer compromises. So it's not magic new budgets. It's sometimes repurposing of those budgets. We had a company who was doing a literally $5 million infrastructure project to upgrade their phone IVR. And it turns out you may not need to spend that same amount today to get to real quality if you're looking around at some of the newer options available. So one other one I'll flag here too is the doing more, as we've talked for years about support as also a revenue driver. And some of you have voiced that you're being asked to cross-sell or upsell, find ways to get people opening new accounts. So when they do contact support, and I think this is another really interesting opportunity of the do more, is figure out where people are going to be the most impactful. People are much better at selling, it turns out, than AI, because they can do the relationship, that like way that we've all for hundreds of thousands of years evolved to be doing business. So it makes a lot of sense to think about getting your customers in contact with an agent in those places where they can really help, really leave a positive impression, or do that cross-sell or upsell if that's part of your business as well. And automate away some of those other things is maybe the way to think about the trade-offs, is it's not all a blanket bucket of good quality or good human engagement or good AI. It's a mix of all of those things really layered together. So strike the right balance. BPOs come into this as well. And maybe a good example here to share is 2 large companies using a number of BPOs. So I'll give them as the contrast because they are each working with several outsourced teams. One of them has really chosen, as part of how they get to quality, to overpay their BPOs. They are maintaining more staff than they need most of the time so that they can handle their peak volume without having to retrain people or see the turnover, because that's how they've seen quality to date. We've got another one who, as soon as they realized, looking at their reporting with Assembled, that they were overpaying for the hours they were actually getting, they were immediately able to cut millions of dollars out of their bottom line. So that they're really, and they're like, they were willing to do the trade-off of, sure, that means they're going to ramp up and down a little bit more often with seasonality. But it gave them that thinner margin that they could operate against. So getting the right data here, looking at the different parts of your business and where you can make those trade-offs, is just another lever that's now available to all of you to pull. One more example maybe on that scaling front too is another company we've worked with, Thrasio. They really came into both workforce management, but also working with Assist with this goal of saying, we need to change our KPIs for support. They've done an amazing job of moving the needle on AI adoption to really drive efficiency in automation. And they've seen it work. They're automating a ton of their volume. They're seeing an improvement in customer satisfaction from that, because they were all underwater and not always doing meeting their own expectations for quality of support when humans were handling every one of those cases. So they've now worked with us across all of their brands to support email automation and a co-pilot experience across all their channels, so that they're getting to meet their goals. Their head of support is definitely looking like a hero and gets on stage a lot and has gotten a lot of credit from the rest of his leadership team and seen his career grow as well as a result of really delivering great results and support. For them, a lot of it was about the scale of automation, being able to really grow the business with what he had, and he was able to do that with a mix of different tools. So this really underscores that for all of you, as you're thinking about takeaways, it's not a one-size-fits-all strategy. Every support team isn't operating from the same playbook. Some of you are in survival mode, some of you are growth. It's great. You've got a bunch of different trade-offs you can make to figure out how do we get the right mix of support going forward. Last piece I wanted to touch on, and I've mentioned a few times about BPOs. There's a great anecdote someone shared with me a few weeks ago. He said, the unwritten rule when you sign a BPO is you have to hate their guts for a year before you start to like them. They screw up, they get it wrong constantly, they don't show up, they don't deliver for a year, but then it turns around. We're seeing that has certainly been the case historically. There's a lot of frustration. BPOs are under a ton of pressure. The biggest shift I've seen there is two things. One is setting up a champion challenger model. So if you've got multiple BPOs, being able to have them play against each other, they are absolutely competing for your business. And we've seen that work. The other one is that BPOs are increasingly adopting AI. So making sure that you're working with someone who is already adopting AI or AI curious, AI willing, because we see results of things like 50% faster onboarding time of new agents. So if you're spinning people up and down pretty quickly, that matters a lot. Using something like a co-pilot so that you can overcome if there's language barriers, if your BPO team is offshore, or taking language out of it entirely. We saw someone actually sunset a need for having a separate Portuguese site because we built translation into Assist so that you can just have agents responding in their language. It goes to the customer in their own. You no longer need to staff for that. So those are great examples of using AI for getting people up to speed, giving them access to the data, replacing some of that training so that you can get to quality a little faster and hopefully avoid some of the frustration and that sentiment where it's not as big a trade-off in quality as it might have been historically. Daily Pay is a great example of this. They've shifted a ton of their business towards outsourcing, and they have both onshore and offshore. They've driven amazing performance improvements just by having visibility into the data and being able to measure the things that matter to them, work with their outsourced teams, really to get that cycle of continuous improvement going and to give them some of the tools so that they are answering the way that they want, escalating only when appropriate. It costs money every time they're doing an escalation. So having that first line of defense be empowered to give really useful customer support has been huge. Last point I'll touch on, and this really brings it all together as we think about the combination of what's available now with AI, what you can do with outsourced teams, and they really are all looking to win your business. So if you're thinking about how to grow and you can't hire enough people locally, there are a bunch of them that will happily court you and talk with you about how to deliver more of that support. But the big thing for each of you in the year ahead is to look at how you make those things work together in a coordinated way. Because if you just throw AI at part of the problem and there's no clear handoff or there's no feedback loop of, well, what happens with the cases that do get escalated or the bad experiences or the places where people actually abandoned instead of saw real resolution. Certainly we hear a lot of frustration with the containment metrics or deflection metrics of like, oh yeah, we saw it doing a ton of volume, but our actual volume to support never changed at the end of the day. So that's one of those false optimizations for people who've gotten too deep into, oh yeah, it's measuring, it's showing a lot of activity, but that's sometimes busy work more than real value creation. So as long as you've got the metrics, the handoffs, you're looking at how do you train people for the way their work is changing as they handle only more and more complex cases. If you've got automations or AI, your chat doing some of the simple things, those are the opportunities for you. I'd also encourage you to rethink your channel strategy. I talked to a company recently, they're doing like 5% email. They're like, we want to kill email. We think email is terrible because it takes like forever for customers to get a response. Why would they ever email? And that's not a failure of the channel. If your customers want to email in, great. They shouldn't have to wait a long time for a response. So that's something that's fixable. Or if you've been curious about phone and thinking, oh, we can maybe staff that now if we've got a little bit of help in how we do it. That's possible today where it might have been harder 5 years ago. So thinking about your omni-channel strategy and the way you can put all these tools together to really give you a more coordinated, ultimately better delivery of support. That's where it's right people, right place, right time, but also right answer in the right channel for where your customers want to reach you. So those are the last couple things I will leave you with. Is just like you wouldn't expect your tier 1 and tier 3 teams to work on the same issues equally well. You should not expect your outsourced teams and your AI and your internal teams to all handle everything equally well either. So look at the strengths of each and do more to route to think about your channel strategy, really get people, really get your cases to the type of resource that can best get them a resolution with the right expectations. 2 really is meeting people where they are. So that rising expectations is both a challenge and an opportunity for you. So whether that's giving them more channels, giving them more access to information and answers immediately, more ways to get help. That's something that's in each of your control and really using the tools available. Again, I'll reiterate, it's not that AI has to completely solve or not solve at all. Thinking about ways that you can do intake or initial triage, troubleshooting, routing, all of those with AI can save a whole bunch of time and ultimately getting a great resolution for a customer quickly. So as long as they are getting to something fast, it can be a great start to have AI do the first few steps, especially if it saves them some handoffs and escalations. And finally this year, you all only have so many innovation chips to spend at any one moment in time. Probably got some of those big strategic initiatives around how do we use AI, what do we automate, how do we improve quality, how do we scale. Those big drivers really should give you the impetus to choose a tech stack that can scale with you in the face of these macro trends and changes. So something that coordinates the people, as long as you don't believe people are going away in your support org in the next several years, make sure you've got a way for them to work with AI and not just be left hand, right hand, no one knows what the other one is doing and hope it all works out. Similarly, look for tech stacks that'll support a multi-channel AI strategy so that you don't end up with a customer who starts in chat, it ends up creating an email, they get a different AI that gives them a different answer, and now they're stuck in an endless loop. That's one of the things we're starting to see people encounter. And it creates all sorts of compliance problems if you're in that world of what happens when the two AIs disagree. So I encourage you to really think about something that will scale with you in this next phase of people plus AI plus outsource and how you can really put all those together in a great way. If you are looking at buying AI and how to evaluate solutions out there, I hope you'll join us next month for one of my partners in crime, Brian, who's been spending a ton of time with companies who are in this process as well. We'll be happy to share more about what to look for. So stay tuned for his webinar on the 5th. And with that, let's kick it over to a few questions. I think we've got a first one here, which is, what should we look for when evaluating AI vendors to ensure they're getting real value versus just buying into the hype? Oh, Brian's going to talk a bunch more about that, but I will give you a quick preview of riding along on a bunch of people who are going through this evaluation today, which is, one is actually figure out what works for you and if they align philosophically to what you're trying to do. Are they a black box, automate everything? Are they going to give you transparency and explanations? So digging into some of those specific use cases of what do you do when the answer is wrong? How do you ensure that it's right? What channels do they support? Making sure that those pieces all align with what you're looking at, where you have resources and engineering maybe, or people in the mix that you want to put towards working on that. Those are a couple of things I'd look at. And then we've seen a lot of people who are doing evaluations today of like, play with it in real life, on someone else's site, on your own, with your own data, and make sure what you get back feels right. And there's not just like a turn it on and it goes. There's style guides and inputs and data and things that really go into making that great. But you can probably get a pretty good sense as you work with vendors and have them actually show you the product, not just tell you about it. And I'm sure Brian will share way more details. We've got an RFP available on the website if you want to look at some things that may be helpful too, if just questions even to ask. And maybe companies to start looking at if you're looking for a solution there. Got another one here. What does leadership need to see to understand the nuances of AI adoption? Oh, I love this one because I think I'll give you maybe two different answers because it depends a lot on the bias of your leadership team. So how much they are telling you In the one camp, hey, go automate everything. I don't care how you do it. I want to see 78% automation. I want to see 25% automation this year. That's what you got to hit, come hell or high water. Those people really need to see a progression towards why do you believe you can get to that percentage? And what is that going to mean in terms of the overall brand impact, the quality, the people impact? So showing them what that experience actually looks like, showing them some of the paths we've seen work really well, or giving them the confidence that you're working with a team and have chosen a company that can help get you there. So we see a lot of that, like, why should we believe that this is possible? And giving them that credibility of they understand our business, they've done this scale, there's some social proof. That goes a long way. The other camp of leaders I think of as much more focused on the qualitative of the experience of, is this what I want my brand to feel like when a customer contacts us? I want that human touch and that warmth. And the place that I would lean into with that group of leaders is actually have them experience it. Show them what the answers look like. Have them chat, email, get a response, give feedback, weigh in, and bring them along sometimes even on what's the style, what's the brand voice, what's the kind of experience we want to create. Because I think when they feel more connected to it or seeing that you have control of that, we've seen a lot more comfort in embracing AI in those cases. So first, it's understand who you're working with and what's motivating them. How much are they in the cut costs or scale at all costs? How much are they on the qualitative side? And lean into more of what are your tools to control that? And when things aren't perfect, how do you continue to improve? All right, I will do one last question here, and certainly please feel free to reach out at hello@assembledhq.com. If we don't get to your question today, I'm always happy to chat. I love the stories that people have shared and appreciate those. So we'll end on one here of how are we seeing departments change with the roles dedicated directly to AI? It's part of people's jobs, managing full-time AI solutions, verifying answers quality, et cetera. This is a great one because I think there has been a role or two different roles that we're seeing start to spend time on this, and sometimes a third. So one is that the traditional quality teams, a lot of times if they're doing QA or using a QA tool, they've been a lot of the people driving some of the on the ground. We're reviewing answers, we're making sure the data is right, we're making sure the knowledge is right. And it's been a really easy transition for those teams to say, oh yeah, now we're just looking at the AI quality instead of the human agent quality and sampling that. So it's a really nice transition of expertise. I've had a bunch of people even ask us of like, cool, we like these tools for AI evaluation. Can you put those against the human agent? So it's sort of a nice parallel to think of it in the same way. We've also seen a bunch of the support managers of the people who maybe risen up through the ranks of support or building workflows. Some of them are doing it on a dedicated basis, and some of them are actually just doing it as part of the course of their jobs, again, depending how much you're trying to automate. So I think you've got some options of anyone who's been managing your chatbot, who's been managing teams, who's doing support operations, who's doing Q&A, spending some or even dedicated time from those people to continue to look at how do we automate, how do we drive quality, how do we drive the experience. It is definitely worth having people. This is not a thing that you can just outsource to a vendor and hope they understand your business well enough to know what workflows to create and what to do. But you can certainly have someone dedicated who's working with them to drive that progress. So I hope that helps. Definitely do put people and thought into how you do it. It's not a black box, set it and forget it, at least not for great results from what we've seen. So love that you're thinking about how to staff for it, and hope this is helpful to you. There's definitely more data in the report that you will all get as a follow-up here, and would love to hear from you if you're either interested in exploring what we can do with Assist and Assemble together to help you all as you're facing some of the changing landscape ahead. So thank you so much for the time today. Really appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.